Hi, my name's John and I'm the owner of this YouTube channel, and today I'm going to talk about the 1985 to 1988 Code of Points. I just purchased it from the FIG and it arrived in the mail today. It cost me about 35 US dollars or 35 Swiss francs for the book and the shipping. It then cost another 50 US dollars to do the international wire transfer. Overall, I'm surprised to see how similar this code of points is to the one that followed, which I have reviewed in a previous video. I've skimmed through the code, and let's start at the beginning. There were 6 judges total used, and the highest and lowest scores were thrown out, and the middle 4 averaged to get the final score. This code of points used compulsories. The compulsory routines are detailed in a separate document that I don't have. This code does mention that no more than 3 compulsory elements were allowed to also be demonstrated in the optional exercise. And any element that also appeared in the compulsory routine must have occurred in a different connection if used in the optionals. 36 gymnasts performed in the all-around with a maximum of 3 per nation. Qualification was based on the combined totals earned in the compulsory and optional routines, which in this code are referred to as competitions 1A and 1B. To qualify for the event finals, a score in the top 8 on each event, combining again both competitions 1A and 1B was required, and a maximum of 2 gymnasts per nation were, 2 gymnasts per nation were allowed in the event finals. This was the last code of points before the new life rule, meaning that scores carried over from the optional round in determining the final winners of the all-around and event finals. Events other than vault were evaluated from a 9.5 base score. 3 points of this score came from required value parts, meaning a minimum required number of A, B, C, and sometimes D skills for the event finals. 0.5 could be awarded through bonus for a maximum score of 10.0. 2.5 points came from the various compositional requirements and special requirements on 3 of the non-vaulting apparatuses, and 4 points came from execution. Skills in this code of points rated from A through D. I'm not sure when this system was introduced and when the system of medium and superior elements was discarded. That system was present at least until the 1969 Code of Points. In the optionals, or competition 1B, 3A, 3B, and 2C elements were required. In the all-around, also known as competition 2, 3 C elements were required, one of which had to be a natural C element versus a C skill generated through value raising. More about value raising later. In the event finals, or competition 3, 2 natural Cs were required, and 1 D element was required. With regards to the half a point in bonus possible, a maximum of 2/10 could come from originality. 1/10 maximum could come from the performance of an additional D skill beyond whatever may have been required, and 0.2 could come from virtuosity. In terms of repetition rules, I only see 1 in the Code of Points. A value part could be recognized twice as a value part if the connection in which it was performed was not the same. A single skill could also be used a 3rd time to serve as a connection for value raising a separate skill. Originality in this code was defined as elements or connections that go beyond what is considered known, traditional, or classical. A maximum of 0.2 could be awarded for an element or connection that was considered new, and 0.1 for an element or connection that was considered rare. New and rare elements and connections were defined as such in a separate document created by the FIG, but this code of points does suggest that that list would probably have been valid for 1 to 2 years. An element could be considered new even if it had been performed before, as long as it was performed many years ago, such as to create the impression of it being very rare or new. And they mentioned the Zucold transition on the bars as an example. With regards to the 0.2 available for virtuosity, this was awarded if the performance was nearly faultless. This was not awarded in the case of a fall or intermediate swing, or if a required value part or special requirement was missing. It was also not awarded if the total number of deductions exceeded 0.3, or if a single deduction exceeded 0.1. If a gymnast had both a 0.1 and a 0.2 deduction, they could get half of the virtuosity points, or a total of 0.1. This system seems to have represented a form of double jeopardy, or a set of sort of a second set of deductions for messy routines. Execution deductions ranged from 0.1 to 0.5 generally. The inability to take a deduction of less than 0.1 seemed, based on commentary I've heard from this time period, to result in very small deductions being overlooked, especially if they occurred in isolation. Judges, however, may have taken a 0.1 deduction for 2 small deductions, but again, that's sort of based on commentary, not something I've seen in this code. On vault, gymnasts performed 1 vault in the compulsory round, 2 were performed in the optionals and the all-around. The highest score of those 2 vaults counted towards the team or individual total, as well as toward qualification for competition 3, the event finals. In the event finals, 2 different vaults with different vault numbers had to be performed, and the average was considered. The vaults did not have to be from different families. Hence, Svetlana Boginskaya of the Soviet Union won with a tucked and then laid out full twisting Yurchenko. This rule changed in the following code, which required different families. The final score in the event finals was therefore an average of the compulsory and the optionals vault, plus the average of the 2 event finals vaults. There were a variety of D-level vaults, meaning vaults with a 10.0 start value. Some of them are somewhat unusual, like a handspring with a double turn off with no salto, a full twist on and a full twist off, a 1.5 twist on and then a half twist off. These are again just handspring vaults. A piked front half was a 10.0 vault, as was a tucked front full. A tucked front with a half was a 9.9 vault. Also a 10.0 was a salto onto the horse with just a handspring off. A vault that later disappeared from the code of points, I believe as early as 1993. A full twist on with a front tuck off was also a 10.0 vault. I only saw that attempted once by Yelena Davidova in the event finals at the 1980 Olympics. Also in the code are a double front vault, which had yet to be performed. Tucked Tsukuharas and Yurchenko fulls and beyond were all 10.0 vaults. Yurchenko and Tsukuharas with double somersaults were for some reason listed in this code of points, despite never being attempted or performed to my knowledge. As was a 1.5 Tsukuhara, so 1.5 twists onto the horse with a layout off. Also, all of the Yurchenko with full twists or the Luconi vaults, were 10.0s. On the uneven bars, the following were the 4 special requirements. At least 10 different elements had to be performed. Only 4 could occur in order on the same bar. The 5th element had to lead to either a bar change, a dismount, or the touch of the body on another bar. For this purpose, a kip cast was considered 1 element. 2 elements total had to be performed on the low bar so that there was some distribution of elements, and the dismount had to be at least a B skill. A system of value raising functioned as a system of determining the value of connections. There was no specific connection value per se, but connections resulted in the raising of the value of subsequent skills within a connection. The generation of a D skill occurred on the uneven bars in the case of a connection of 2 C elements, in which case the second C skill was raised to a D. However, the skill had to be a natural versus a value-raised C, meaning the first C skill in such a connection. So one disadvantage of this code of points and the next code of points is that this value raising system is rather cumbersome, and I can see why it was eliminated and simplified into the connection value system that we are used to today. However, I am generally in favor of anything that encourages originality and near limitless diversity. There are a variety of element values that stand out in the sense that they are different than what we are used to today. So for example, giant swings with half turns and giant swings with full turns were D elements. A belly beat, which is no longer possible because of the distance of the bars, but a belly beat that cast up into a handstand on the high bar with a half turn is a listed element and is also a D skill. There is also an entire section of elements on the uneven bars that involve taking off from the feet, which I believe was abolished right after this code of points. It's also worth noting that a double twisting layout is a D dismount, as is a double back tuck. Balance beam exercises had to last from 1 minute 10 seconds to 1 minute 30 seconds. There were 4 special requirements: an acrobatic series of at least 2 elements, one of which being a flight element. Flight elements are elements like back handsprings that involve not touching the beam at all during some portion of the skill, unlike a back walkover. But flight elements are not necessarily saltos. The requirement that gymnasts do a salto on the beam did not become a special requirement until 2001. Also, a series of gymnastics elements, meaning leaps, was required, a full turn, and 1 leap or jump of, quote, great amplitude, but there is not a specification that that necessarily be 180 degrees split from what I understand, and also a dismount of at least B. There were a variety of deductions penalizing a routine with no high points, or monotony or lack of rhythm. Value raising on the balance beam started at BC, in which case the C skill became a D skill. So a back handspring step out, layout step out would satisfy this requirement. There are also a couple of unusual element values, more than I can really cover in a timely fashion, but a back handspring mount was a D skill. So was a courbet onto the beam. The D jumps in the code of points were a switch ring leap, a switch leap with half turn butterfly, and also a stretch jump with 1.5 turns. The yang bow jump had yet to be performed, and a sheep jump was only a C skill. The D turns present are similar to what we are used to today, such as the double turn, illusion turn, or double wolf turn. The triple turn had not yet been performed, and there were no, I don't believe that there were any Y turns in this code. The Yurchenko loop skill was a D skill, that is a courbet sideways across the beam. Also, a D skill that is currently a C skill was the back handspring with half turn out of the back handspring, meaning after the hands have touched the beam. Interestingly, a front tuck was only a C skill, a front aerial walkover was a B, a side aerial was a C skill, meaning an aerial cartwheel, and the gainer layout step out was a D skill. The D dismounts were the courbet dismount, meaning a jump with full turn into front somersault, the double front, 2.5 and triple twist, double backs of any variety, full twisting doubles, Arabian double, and the cartwheel into back tuck for sort of a double salto effect originally done by Nellie Kim. And also the gainer layout with full twist off the end of the beam was a D skill. So the one D dismount that I don't see here that I know is in the next code is the gainer double twist off the side of the beam. There were a variety of special requirements on the floor exercise. It does not appear as though each event had the same number of special requirements. On the floor, gymnasts had to do 3 tumbling passes. One of them had to have at least 2 saltos or a D skill. A gymnastics element of a B skill was required, as was a dismount series of, containing at least a B skill. And a tumbling pass was defined as a pass of at least 3 acrobatic elements, one of which being a salto. So that makes me think that a front handspring into a front layout full twist, even though that would have been a D pass, would not have met this requirement. Value raising on the floor exercise started at CC, or at least that's when it started generating D skills. And that is a indirect connection of 2 C skills. They actually say in the code of points that no direct connection of C skills had ever occurred. But the way that these connections are worded, it doesn't really look like they differentiate between direct and indirect connections. Looking at some of the most difficult tumbling passes in this code of points on the floor exercise, the D elements are the front layout full twist, all saltos forward regardless of body position with 1.5 twists, the double front with rollout, Arabian double front with rollout, 2.5 and triple twist, and any double salto regardless of body position or twist. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this code was not a whole lot less difficult than the code that followed it, and the codes are relatively similar. The element values are similar, the basic construction of the code is similar. So really the biggest difference comes down to the basic construction of optional exercises. So in the 85 code, only 3 C skills were required in competition 2. And then in competition 3, the event finals, 2 C skills, both of which had to be natural, and then 1 D skill was required. In the 1989 code, this differs as follows. In competition 1B, 2 C skills were required. So that's the same, although one of them has to be natural, so that's, I guess, a little bit more difficult. In competition 2, 2 natural Cs are required, which is one more. And also 1 D skill was required in the competition 2, or the all-around, which is very different. And then in competition 3, 2 D skills were required in 1989 as opposed to only 1 in 1985, but there's no specification about whether those be natural or value raised in the 89 code. The other major difference here is that the base score in 1989 is actually higher, 9.6, so only 4/10 of bonus were required as opposed to the 5 required the code before. But the difference is that none of those points in 89 come from virtuosity. They all come from originality and the additional natural D. So even though there's 5/10 in bonus required in 1985, it might be best to really think of it as more like 3, because 2 of those tenths just come from performing the exercise well. Let me know if you have any questions. I think I've covered just about everything I wanted to, but if you would like to ask anything and have me look it up, or you spot any errors, please let me know in the comments. Thanks.